keynote will be about taking development to a broader audience by using new tools and tactics. And we're very proud to invite to the stage Helen Clark. She's the United Nations Development Program Administrator and a former Prime Minister of New Zealand. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. How much time do we have?
How much time you got?
Can I call you Helen?
Please.
Okay, well, Helen, it's a great honor and pleasure to be talking with you here, and you've had such a vast experience, and I've heard such wonderful things about your country.
They're all true.
And now you're leading up the development program of the United Nations, which is the biggest, if I'm not misunderstood, program of the United Nations. And what they've asked me to ask you about is there a role for social media in development?
Oh, there certainly is, and it's playing out as we speak in many, many ways. I think of it in about three categories. One is the incredible application for getting more information out, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's e-government and services. ICT can connect people in remote communities into what's happening in ways never seen before. It could be diagnosis to a remote health clinic, it could be delivery of education, lessons, who knows. I've seen many examples of it, but it's very, very exciting as a platform for development. Secondly, the use in disaster response and crisis response. If you've got people on the ground giving instant feedback, you know what you're responding to. It can be part of early warning systems. The third point I'd make is the amazing role of social media, ICT, in the democratization, if you like, the transitions that we've seen across the Arab States region in the last year and a half. The use of text, of Twitter, of Facebook, of YouTube, of every known social network to get messages out there. I remember seeing a comment from one young Egyptian activist who said, we use Twitter to get the crowd, Facebook to report on it, YouTube to post the video, whatever. I mean, it's very segmented media, but very exciting.
I'm going to interrupt you just for 1 second right here. We've got a very special surprise for you. Online, straight from Paris, one of my favorite people, Ronaldo, the great soccer player, one of Brazil's and the world's greatest all-time soccer. Hello, Ronaldo.
Olá, bom dia.
Bom dia
a todos.
Ronaldo.
Espero que todos aí que não falam português tenham o fone para tradução simultânea, porque meu inglês ainda não é o bastante assim bom para speaking assim.
Temos.
Olá, Helen. Olá a todos. Bem-vindos ao Rio de Janeiro, essa cidade maravilhosa que é a minha cidade natal. Queria dizer que a Rio+Social é uma oportunidade única para o mundo, para que planeje o futuro que queremos. E é uma honra fazer parte desse debate global, mesmo que longe daí, mas graças a essas novas tecnologias. Mas eu tenho minha maior representante aí presente, que é a Bia Antoni, que é minha esposa, e que representa também a nossa fundação, Criando Fenômenos. E que, nesse momento, ela deve estar debaixo de uma cadeira, morrendo de vergonha.
Ronaldo.
Como vocês sabem, eu sou embaixador da boa vontade do PNUD. E como tal, gostaria de apresentar a Helen Clark, administradora do PNUD. E vamos todos ouvir atentamente o que ela tem para dizer. Um abraço a todos.
Obrigado, Ronaldo. Eu queria perguntar para ele se o nosso time, o Corinthians, vai ganhar amanhã.
De nada, de nada.
Ronaldo, o Corinthians ganha amanhã?
Tô aqui, vou tentar assistir ao jogo aqui. Vou tentar assistir o jogo, vai ser muito tarde aqui, mas eu vou tentar acompanhar mesmo que pela internet.
Okay. Então, we'll be back to English. Thank you very much, Ronaldo. I'm not, as you probably know, since he works for you, he's one of our national treasures.
Absolutely, and a UNDP treasure.
UNDP treasure, yeah. So you were talking about the role of social media in development, and I'd like to, you talked about remote diagnosis, and that's something that I find fascinating. How many, what should I say, non-media applications are there for social media? I mean, can we actually do practical things like, aside from talking to each other, which is wonderful, and influencing each other and making reports and contacts, but a doctor can actually diagnose someone over Twitter?
I'm not sure people would want their diagnosis tweeted to the world. Maybe direct messaging.
You would hope it would be good news in that case.
Well, yeah, maybe just the good news and not too many details. But you know, it applies in developed and developing countries, because the reality is in developed countries, not every health service, for example, or not every education course in the curriculum can be available everywhere. And so ICT can link people to expertise when otherwise their choices might be quite limited. Certainly in my own country, there was the possibility to, send the result of a scan to a specialist in a big tertiary hospital for diagnosis. And I think in the developing world, where transport's often very poor from one place to another, being able to get to a big clinic or specialist hospital may be just totally impractical off the planet. To be able to connect a primary care worker with someone who knows more in maybe a secondary centre is pretty important. It can be life and death. Now, on education, the chances are that you can link children across the world, across the country. You can put a specialist teacher in front of young people who they wouldn't otherwise have access to. You can help the professional development of the teachers.
Are you doing that? Is PNUD involved in that currently?
Well, we're very involved with governments on ICT rollout. And if I took Bangladesh, which has had a visionary policy of getting ICT hubs out to every local unit of government to be able to link people in exactly this way. Yes, we have been part of that design and elsewhere.
Now, as a development agency, what is your primary goal?
Primary goal to support countries, communities, people to build the capacities to fly, basically. We have a motto, empowered lives, resilient nations. Mm-hmm. That's what it's about. It's about empowerment to be able to reach your dreams. And empowerment flows from having the opportunity to be educated, having the opportunity to access good health, having adequate income, whether it's sourced from self-employment or from decent work. Those are absolutely the basics. Now, what Rio+20 also very much brings into the frame is that you will not sustainably reduce poverty and inequity in our world if we're living in a world where the very basis of life on the planet is being undermined. And we strongly argue that you have to pursue greater equity and greater sustainability together. They're linked themes. In other words, Rio for us has never been an environmental conference. It's been a sustainable development conference where we pursue related objectives together.
How do we go about pursuing equity?
Well, big ask, because inequity and inequality is rife, and inequality, is growing in a lot of countries. So you need policies that directly target the inequality and the poverty together. If you have growing inequality, the chances of being able to reduce poverty are less anyway. So what we look at is supporting the design of a lot of the now very well-known social protection schemes, whether it's Brazil sem miséria, Brazil without poverty, whether it's India's Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which guarantees eligible rural poor a minimum 100 days work a year at a minimum wage, guarantees women's participation, works on conservation-related programs. There's a lot of ways of directly getting cash to the poor to lift living standards and give them the opportunity to build their livelihoods. But don't wait for the market to do these things. It won't. You know, markets can be helpful, but they don't deliver social justice or equity. That is a matter of deliberate public policy, prioritising addressing the needs of poor people and saying we're going to eradicate extreme poverty, we're going to eradicate hunger. That is a matter of deliberate policy. It must be.
So business isn't going to fix that one for us?
No, because its job is not to fix equity and injustice, but of course an innovative private sector can be enormously helpful in driving a country's development forward. And I think it's important at conferences like this one that we hear the voices of the private sector, which is really interested in driving sustainable development forward as well.
We frequently hear the argument here in Brazil from that we need much more development and much more economic growth, and we cannot afford the luxury of being concerned about the environment. That environment is seen as an impediment to growth, and that we need to have more freedom in order. Brazil is a poor country, and we need to have the freedom to develop our economy, as happened in Europe and the United States, to pick out two examples. How are poverty and the environment related? Do you think that we can eradicate poverty without destroying the environment?
Oh, absolutely. And look at Ethiopia, a least developed country with very low GDP per capita, which has launched a low carbon, climate resilient green economy strategy, and is determined to lift the living standard of its people without having a heavy environmental impact. Look at the words of the
Howard, can you tell us a little bit more about that? I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, well,
it sounds fascinating.
It was launched
so they're a very poor country, and they are concerned about not emitting more carbon?
Absolutely.
Well, that's a tremendous example.
It's a tremendous example, and the great thing about Rio+20 is you can share these experiences and examples, and Ethiopia will be here and willing to talk to anybody about the strategy. UNDP is acting as the manager of the trust fund, which is collecting donor contributions for this, but the strategy was launched at the Durban Climate Conference last year, and it's extremely exciting and really, really visionary leadership, in my opinion. But we can also cite the words of President Dilma Rousseff herself, who said at her Porto Alegre speech in January, it is possible to grow, include, protect and conserve at the same time, and of course it is. So at UNDP we advocate what we call a triple win approach to policy, that we support countries to design policies, sets of policies, which will simultaneously reduce poverty, have social benefits, including greater equality for women and other marginalised groups, and also be good for the environment. And it is possible to do all these things simultaneously, and should be.
Okay. This is an interesting question. I'm not sure that you're precisely the right person to ask it to, but here we go. From Nate Wilkie. Scientists are historically bad communicators. What can science and academics do to fix this? Do you work with scientists?
Well, not directly, but you know, I agree that sometimes academics, and I was one earlier in my career, and scientists and researchers can talk in their own language and jargon and code, and you have to decode that. And I think UN Environment Program does a great job on actually popularising the science so we can all understand it. So do many advocacy groups. UNDP's job, of course, is to work from what the science is telling us to help countries set objectives for which will see that we ideally don't go over these planetary boundaries, which is so important. So yes, sometimes scientists are not the greatest communicators, but other people are. There are, of course, honourable exceptions. You know, think of some of the great presenters of the nature shows on television who've managed to get their message into something that the general public can understand.
What is your take on Rio+20? How do you think the conference is going? Do you think we're making progress? Are you excited about it? What do you think we should be more concerned about that we aren't talking about here?
Well, I think it's always exciting when you get tens of thousands of people in one city all focused on one big event. And I hope that the outcome, like the Earth Summit outcome, will motivate people to go home and do more and better. That has to be the message from Rio, that in many ways our planet is in peril across the three dimensions. Look at the world economy being dragged down by events we're all familiar with. Look at the social unrest and discontent from people who are excluded from economic opportunity, excluded from being able to participate in the political life, social life of their country. And look at what's happening to the environment around us. So these things have to be tackled, and they have to be tackled as part of an integrated set of policies which seeks to build a better world. If that's the message everyone goes home with from Rio and says, let's find our national pathway to dealing with this, that would be a very positive outcome.
Let me ask you another question. What is, how is it different running a development organization, the development organization for the United Nations, and the role of Prime Minister? Do you do the same sorts of things? What do you do differently? What lessons have you taken from your role as Prime Minister to the development agency?
Well, both are leadership jobs, and funnily enough, you do pretty much the same sorts of things. You make a lot of speeches, you attend a lot of events, you have a lot of high-level meetings, you have a lot of committee work, you have paperwork that can consume you 24/7. And the fact that I was the leader of my country for 9 years also gives me a lot of access to other leaders, a lot of people I know over a lifetime in public life, and a lifetime actually of moving in international circles. As a young party member in New Zealand, I was linked with people in other social democratic parties. These friendships go back, close to 40 years. So all that's been helpful. I think the main difference, if I may, with a media audience is you don't have, as administrative UNDP, the media waiting around to see if you're going to slip on a banana skin or have a stroke or something like that. It's more a media attention that's focused around the issues and the challenges, and that is intrinsically more satisfying.
It is intrinsically more satisfying?
Correct.
Let me before I go to this question here, I'm curious. New Zealand is frequently upheld as an example of sustainable development. How did you do it?
Well, I wouldn't want to imply that New Zealand doesn't have its environmental challenges. It does. And it's on a race against time to protect rare species of birds in particular, because New Zealand as a landmass has been isolated from other land masses forever and a day. And so it developed a bird life which wasn't accustomed to having predators. And then when people came and brought their rats and then their cats and their stoats and their ferrets and their possums and the rest of it, it played absolute havoc. But you could say that we still have, birds of a genre that long disappeared in other countries. But we are in a race against time. And yes, we do have our issues, but there's also intense environmental interest in New Zealand. When I was Prime Minister, I set out a vision for the country to be carbon neutral. We could be carbon neutral, absolutely. We set target dates for being carbon neutral in transport system, energy systems, waste, etc. This is achievable. A country like New Zealand can lead the way. When
will you be carbon neutral?
Well, we had an aspiration to achieve it in, say, the energy sector by 2030. New Zealand can be 100% renewable energy in a good rain year. We're around 70% renewable now, but with more investment in, hydro, we have a lot of wind, solar, tidal technologies, whatever comes along with hydrogen. For sure, we can be totally carbon neutral in electricity energy generation.
Well, that's very good news, and I think we should all take a good look at what New Zealand is doing. I've got a question here from Larissa. She asks, do you think that technology is the answer to developing countries, or are basic needs still primary concerns?
Well, basic needs are very primary concerns because we still have, roughly a billion extremely poor and a billion hungry people in our world. And that's not satisfactory, is it? In the 21st century, it's never been satisfactory. But, we see such great extremes of wealth. We see a squeezed middle class in many countries, and then we see extremely poor people. So we do have to focus on the basics, but I think technology is also part of focusing on the basics. You have to use the latest, and as I said, with respect to social media and ICT, it can actually help with warning systems about where there is going to be a food shortage in, say, coming months. It's part of the whole system of responding to disaster and crisis.
What kind of equipment do you distribute to people, or do you encourage people to buy? I mean, do they cell phones? Do they use computers, or is it all of the above? Or is there something more specific? Are people getting very advanced?
Well, we don't sort of recommend a particular mode, if you like, but what I would observe is the cell phone and text messaging, which is prolific in, say, sub-Saharan Africa. Often the costs of the smartphones would be prohibitive. People don't necessarily have access to the internet at all, but text they do. And where there's not text, it was interesting to see in some of the states where there were uprisings in the Arab region in the past year and a half, there was a speak-to-text service where people could phone, leave a message, and that would be texted. So there's been a lot of
innovation. Where was that? I'm sorry.
I understand in Egypt there was speak-to-text. Yeah. So, and if you look at the disaster response use of ICT, that came out of the incredible innovation in Kenya with what's called the Ushahidi platform, which was a response to the outbreak of post-election violence in 2007, and they helped sort of spontaneously chart and map that, and that's now developing into a fantastic platform for disaster response and crisis response.
So I can say to my journalist colleagues that there's some very interesting stories coming out of Africa, apparently, in the social media realm.
Well,
and some very good news, some very positive.
Incredible news.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, let's give two specific examples. One, in Nairobi, a few weeks ago, I met at an ICT innovation hub. Most incredible young ICT innovators and entrepreneurs. The place is buzzing with ideas. There is so much innovation. The big techo companies like Microsoft should be in touch with these young people. They're world leading, truly. So worth Googling and finding out.
What are they doing there?
Well, they actually provide innovation space, so you can be, as a young entrepreneur, given your desk and terminal and access to the internet, and you get on with generating and designing your software and building up your business idea and so on. It's like any innovation hub facility you see in my country, USA, whatever. Absolutely fantastic. Another example, ICT in Africa, the commodities exchange in Ethiopia, which UNDP gave the seed funding for. And when you go into the commodities exchange, there's the electronic boards with the price of the different grades of coffee up on the board. The traders are trading like they would in the Chicago Stock Exchange floor. But excitingly, what it means is for the small farmer out there with the text messaging on the end of the phone, they can't be cheated anymore by middlemen because the prices can be texted, straight out, instant feedback from the market. They know what they should be getting for their goods when the guy comes around to buy it. I mean, there's very exciting use of ICT.
That's a great story.
It's a great story.
That's a great story. Wonderful.
Yeah.
A wonderful example. We've got just about 1 minute left. I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk about what do you foresee for the future. What should we be focusing on? What can we take out of Rio+20, and what do you foresee for the future? Are you optimistic?
I was in politics almost all my life before I came to UNDP, and now I'm in development. In both areas, I'm in the hope business, so I'm always optimistic. Whatever the outcome says, the outcome document says, we're going to get out there and work with whatever the resources are in country to get the best results we can for sustainable development. So yes, I'm professionally optimistic because I know it can be done. I know it can be done.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been a great honor and a pleasure.
Thank you. Obrigado.